Guys, behind me is the top dog of the 911 lineup. This is the 911 ST, and if you guys have watched my previous reviews, I reviewed the manual 911 GT3, and honestly, I hated it. I thought the gearbox was terrible, but this thing is a whole different animal. So today, we're gonna look around the car, I'm gonna show you some cool features, I'm gonna go drive it, and I'll tell you exactly what it's like to drive. So here it is, the talk of the town, the 911 ST, and man, do we have it in the right color. So at first glance, this might look just like a GT3 Touring, especially if it wasn't in this color, if it was in like a black or white or something, but there's small cues that kind of give away the fact that it is an ST. To start off, you see the ST badge right here in the middle and the center lock wheels, and these come with standard magnesium wheels, and not only that, if you look underneath the wheels, comes with standard carbon ceramic brakes. Another hint that this is not a GT3 is the little cutout right here that helps with airflow. This doesn't exist on the GT3, only on the GT3 RS. But obviously the biggest signs are the actual logo, the 911 ST logo, and the kind of heritage logo for the 60th anniversary of Porsche 911. Other than that, obviously this car is super low-key about how special it is compared to the other 911s in the lineup, but it's enough talking about the car. Let's go drive it and see what it's like. But just before we go for a drive, if you guys enjoy these vlogs, you guys enjoy the reviews and all these videos that I make, it will really mean a lot if you guys hit the subscribe button. Please, I really appreciate it, and let's move on to the video. Guys, welcome to a car that I've been more excited to drive probably than anything else that has come out in the last year. We are driving the 911 ST. What the ST is pretty much is take almost the body of a GT3 Touring, take the engine from a GT3 RS, and make it as driver friendly and as fun to drive as possible. Now, for those of you who aren't too familiar with the Porsche lineup, what this means is 520 horsepower from a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6, and this thing is just so lively. Now, I have gone to drive the 992 GT3 both in PDK and manual. I've reviewed them on the channel, and if you guys have seen the videos before, you'd know that I wasn't the biggest fan of the manual, which is very weird for me because normally I am all about manual cars. So the manual in that car almost felt like a Golf R manual to me. I mean, the clutch was so soft, the shifter was kind of like not very engaging, but it was just the whole package. It kind of seemed like they put a manual in there just for the sake of saying, hey, we're offering this car with a manual transmission. But what they did with this 911 ST is they pretty much decided, you know what, we already have the best track cars. You know, the GT3 RS is a monster. Even the GT3s, the manual and the PDK, Touring and regular, are kind of built to do the best they can on the track. The clutch is light and everything like that, so you can shift faster on the track, and it's still just about lap times rather than an actual driver feel of the car. But there's a lot of enthusiasts just like me that personally don't really care about track times. I'm not a track guy. I like getting on the road and having fun with a car. Now this car does it better than anything else, because I was so turned off of 992s after driving that manual transmission that I always said best 911 to buy is a 991.2 GT3, because the manual of that is just so much fun and you still get that crazy aggressiveness of a GT3 without having to sacrifice the analog feel of the car. What they did here is they kind of brought that back. We have a clutch that feels a lot heavier and a lot more normal. You know, when I got out of my GT4 this morning to get into this, it didn't feel that different, and the GT4 is kind of known for having one of the best manual transmission you can buy in a modern Porsche. And not only that, this shifter is this short shifter, but it's a little bit notchy. It's pretty satisfying to drive. Man, when you pass 3,500 RPM on this, it really opens up. But this thing is a perfect driver's car, and this kind of sits at the top of the list of 911s. This is the hardest car to get. I think it's the most expensive, and that kind of just shows you that the car everybody wants is not the car that goes fastest on the track, because now the GT3 RSs are losing their hype. Everybody's trying to get them. They're not as special as they were hyped out to be originally. This is the car that people don't even talk about, because how are you even going to get one? What's the point of talking about it when you have to be the top of the top Porsche VIP customer to even get an allocation to be able to pay and buy one of these cars? But what they did do with this car that I really appreciate is they kind of brought it all back to the basics. What I mean by that is the new GT3s and GT3s have like the knob here for all the different modes and all the stuff you can change and personalize to yourself. Here, they got you the perfect car. You don't need to change that much about it, so you don't even get that little knob here. And this specific build, which is weird because I didn't know that little options like that can change how accessible everything is in the car, this one does not have a front lift. But what that means is, instead of having to scroll through the screen like in the other ones to go and open your exhaust valves or change the dampers, you have that in a button right here, because instead of having the front lift button, you just have the exhaust button. They made it easier for you instead of just giving you a blank button. And that means you can personalize your car to actually be usable and just easy to access the things that are important to you. If personally you don't need a front lift and you kind of can get away without using it, because honestly it's not terrible. A lot of these cars don't have it, and it's not a make it or break it type of thing. You now don't have to go through the whole menu and everything to get to the exhaust, which, let's be real, nobody driving this car is going to want to drive it with the exhaust on quiet mode. So what else did they do to this car? They removed the rear wheel steering. Now, as much as you think, man, that's such a performance benefit, that makes the car handle so much better, it did save a lot of weight, along with so many other things they did to save the weight. And because of that, this thing is about 50 kilograms lighter than a GT3. And you really feel that. This car is so lively and so nimble. And even though it feels like maybe you're missing out with that rear wheel steering, yes, it handles around sharp corners a lot better with it, but this thing feels so much more raw than, you know, the car just kind of doing it for you. When you're driving a GT3, you kind of feel like no matter what you do in a corner, the car is going to make that corner. You're never going to understeer, you're not going to oversteer, because the car is just kind of going to save you with that rear wheel steering. Here, you have to work for it a little bit more, which makes it a lot more rewarding. The cool thing about this car is Porsche kind of said, we know what you want. We know what we need to do to give you guys the best driver's car. And they haven't done that many times before. The last time they made a car like this really was the 911R, when in the 991 generation, same thing, you couldn't get the GT3 RS in manual. So they gave you a car that looks almost exactly like a GT3 Touring, gave you the powertrain from a GT3 RS and a manual transmission. And to make it even more raw in that car and in this car, they kind of took out some of the noise isolation in the cabin. So you feel like you're more one with the car. You can hear it a lot better. You can just kind of sense that you're more of an aggressive type of car. And when I say they knew what you need, they gave you on this car standard carbon ceramics. They gave you standard magnesium wheels. So you're saving away with the wheels. You have the better brakes. So you're still getting all these, I don't know if I want to say track options, but these driver-friendly options that make the car a more pleasurable experience to just rip around in. But this has still some of the best driving capabilities and cornering speeds and everything you can ask for. This feels almost like a 997 GT3 RS that is just a ton of power, clutch that makes you actually work for it. I wouldn't say to the extent of the GT3 RS of that generation, but it makes you work for it. You're back to the analog days. Even though we have all these digital screens here, and I do feel like I'm in, you know, a bit too modern of a car for what I'm looking for in a 911 driving experience. The actual driving experience itself doesn't match what I'm looking at. It actually gives me the old school, proper work for it, have to put some force into the clutch feel. But man, do I like this car. And the cool thing is, even though this car is stripped out, you don't feel like it when you're in the car. It still has these kind of leather covered carbon bucket seats. You have a leather dash, you have cool carbon fiber, which obviously is weight saving, but you also have a leather steering wheel. And I love the leather steering wheel. Even though I have Alcantara on my car, the leather steering wheel allows you to be able to grip the wheel anywhere you want. You're not really worried about destroying the steering wheel, because with this Alcantara steering wheels, I gotta tell you, they don't age very well at all. So this is an interior that could look perfect even 20 years from now if you drive the hell out of this car, which I certainly hope a lot of people that have these are going to properly use them and not just keep them in garages. But unfortunately, as of now, I think there's a few customer cars already delivered around here, and this is still the only car I have seen in Canada, because they're just kind of going to collections. People are driving the GT3 Tourings instead, just because of how much this car is over sticker. People are just hoping to bank on the value and leave this car in low mileage. Now, the other cool thing with this car is it's something that, again, you don't really know unless you really look into these cars. And I had a call with the owner of this car that gave me kind of the brief notes of what he liked about the cars. He's had, you know, some of the coolest Porsches in recent history. But in the 992 GT3s in the manual, when you go to rev match yourself, there's about a 0.5 second delay, because they don't want people over revving the car and then you might redline it or something when you don't mean to. So they want to give it a brief kind of moment, which kind of makes the car control you a little bit, and it makes it not feel like it's totally in your control. The 991.2 was a little bit better. The delay when you rev match was about 0.5. Here it's maybe 0.1 or maybe even no delay. The second you click to blip the throttle bounces up. And I've never driven an LFA, but I feel like LFA rev speeds are probably something kind of like this. It's unbelievably fast and lively. The car just loves to rev up, so quick doing it. The thing I really like about the GT cars in the manuals, and especially this as well, even though the Carreras are still being offered in manual, they're not being offered with a 6-speed transmission. They're being offered with a 7-speed. And honestly, in my opinion, I think that's just a little bit too much going on. I think you're better off keeping a 6-speed, keeping everything simple, driver kind of focus instead of just adding that extra gear for maybe fuel efficiency or top speed or whatever you want to add it for. I think a 6-speed is kind of the sweet spot. It's the way to go, and it just makes you feel like the car was not overcomplicated. Everybody likes these older cars because they are, you know, more analog, more raw, and this car is one of the only new cars you can buy that does have that feel. Now, because of less sound insulation, this car sounds incredible. Obviously, we have the exhaust on right now. We're going to downshift a little bit. Let's give it a little bit of a pull. The car's still being broken in, so I can't push it too hard, but listen to this. It sounds so good for a stock exhaust. I mean, this car has 400 kilometers on it. I can't push it. That was like 5,000 RPM. Once I'm sure you get to 7,000, 8,000 RPM, this thing will sound insane. I don't think there's any reason to put an exhaust on this, which is saying a lot because a lot of these Porsches, they do need an exhaust. They don't sound great from the factory, but this is a whole different story, and it carries speeds around corners so well, and it makes you want to push it a little bit more, while you still have to be on edge a little bit because you don't have that rear wheel steering. So you can't push it too hard because the car is not going to save you. You got to rely on your driving skills to save you with this car. So as much as this car is not as track focused as a GT3 or a GT3 RS, that doesn't mean that it's not as aggressive as one of those cars. The suspension here is so rough, and you can hear every little thing that's just happening in the car. It's so mechanical, and it's a mechanical noise that I have not heard in Porsches in the last 15 years, and it really makes you feel like you're driving a machine, not a computer. But the one thing I gotta get back to that we talked about earlier is how hard this car is to get. Now, in the last few years, the hottest car in the market, the car, you know, everybody's been talking about, whether you're into cars or not, everybody's been talking about the GT3 RS, which this car is kind of based off of. But the GT3 RS alone is hard enough to get. GT3 RS, you have to, you know, buy the GT3s and all that. There's no exact rule, there's no exact thing you have to buy like people think there is, but it is doable to get one of those cars without spending millions of dollars to port. Those cars, you know, they're around, they're available. There's not a specific limited amount of numbers that they're gonna make out of those. This is a different story. This, they're only making 1,963, and as much as that sounds difficult, the last car they made this many of was the Speedster. I think it might have been 1948 or 1963, I don't remember, but that car alone was insanely hard to get, and this is now to a whole new level because it's been 5 years since that car was around, and in those 5 years, Porsche allocations became all the hype. People that don't know about cars have been buying all these cars just so they can get the next car that honestly, they don't know anything about. And because of that, this car is so hard to get because a lot of the people that have been qualifying for the GT3 RSs and all those cars, they either don't drive manual or they don't really care about the cars. They want something a little more flashy, where this is just not flashy. And now it's really down to the real enthusiasts, the real collectors that are going to be getting these cars. The types of people that are getting these cars are, you know, your 918 owners, your 959 owners, your Carrera GT owners, the people that like have real driver's cars. This is not going to be your only 911. This is not going to be one of 3 cars you have even. This is the most special thing they've made since the 911R, and arguably better than that. I haven't driven one of those yet, but this is a great car. Thing is, these cars are going to be trading for $200,000-$300,000 over a sticker because the people that can afford them that didn't get an allocation can pay $200,000-$300,000 over sticker. And now we're starting to ask ourselves, is this car worth that money? Now, let's say we're talking about $500,000 US after the markup, or, you know, maybe even a little bit more. Is it worth it? I think so, because what are you going to get for that money? You're going to get a Huracan STO, you're going to get a 48 Pista, and if you're not a flashy guy and you just want the manual, proper, driver-focused driving experience, this is the best new car to get. Yes, you can go get a 997 GT3 RS, you can get all those cars, but they don't have some of the certain comforts that this car has. And I'm hoping the people that are buying this car, buying it to drive it. And, you know, as much as you say, listen to the exhaust, don't worry about the electronics, don't worry about all that, you know what, it's nice having Apple CarPlay, it's nice having all these little features. Even auto blip is nice having. I know it's kind of like not the move to make as a car guy, but it's nice having sometimes. And this is kind of the perfect all-in-one package car you can get. It's not perfect, but the fact that it's not perfect is weirdly what makes it perfect in my eyes. So yes, I think this might be the best 911 ever made. I have to drive the R to maybe compare it to, but other than that, I just don't see there being even a close second.